My name is Anja McManus, and I want to show you today how I create my paintings that are called Songs of Flying Dragons. So these paintings consist of, they're mixed media pieces where I use handmade paper with a Korean poem on it, and the name of the poem is Songs of Flying Dragons. It's in an ancient Korean writing system called Hangul. So to get started with this, of course, you need the paper, but you can really use any other kind of handmade paper that has interesting designs on it, maybe writings. There's Chinese writings, and I found Tibetan writings. So there's all kinds of neat papers out there. And I have a small 12 by 12 canvas. And what you're going to need also is some Modge Podge and some brushes, sponge brushes or other brushes, so you can use the glue to tape this on. The important thing is to begin with is to kind of figure out how I'm going to create a design with the paper, and I tear the paper into pieces and then arrange it and see what just inspires me and what looks good. So let's get started with ripping up some paper. I usually have a lot of scrap pieces from previous paintings, and I don't throw anything away unless it's really small pieces. But here is something that I already like how it could play out, because I tore out a section for another piece in the middle, but maybe I can just kind of go with this and see what this will do if I put this at the bottom here and I really just randomly rip this and see what develops. So I like that. This piece maybe that would work here. Just kind of have to see also how the letters come together. On this particular paper, I like these circular shapes, so somehow I want to make sure that I have one of those shapes on my painting. So I'm just ripping something out here and see how can this fit. So I have this piece maybe up here, but it's a little too big. So let's see. Rip out more of the circle. Oh, now we're getting somewhere. Like maybe an arrangement like this, but I need more on the sides. I want to have more paper all together. So I need extra pieces. I feel like I need something up here to complement this. Yeah, maybe just like this, and then leave a little bit to where then I can paint in between. So this looks pretty good. And maybe for this painting that would be enough, and then I can just have a lot of paint on the outside. Or if I want to frame it, and if I do have something, let's see if I have a little strip that might work here. I might just add a thin little strip of letters just on the side. Rip off a little bit more. And as you can see, this is not about being exact and perfect, because I really want this painting to look like some ancient stone plates that were found and dug up in an archaeology dig. And as you will see, once those paint treatments are complete, that's really what it looks like. So now I'm ready to glue this down, and I have my Modge Podge, and I don't mix the Modge Podge with water for these because I just noticed it sticks better, and I also like to use the Modge Podge gloss. Obviously that couldn't really see that, but the glossy one works better because it somehow protects the paper a little bit better. And then I start putting the Modge Podge on everything here. Try to remember how it worked, and you can always move it around because it doesn't stick immediately. I think I'm just gonna keep this like in this orientation, and I also then go over the front because it does preserve the paper a little bit when I start aging it and painting over it. So I'm going to finish it, and I do that with every piece until they're all glued together. Okay, now that my paper has been glued onto the canvas and has dried completely, and that's very important that you don't work on the wet paper that's wet from the glue. So now everything's really tight on the canvas, it's dry. Now I'm ready for the next step for these paintings. So I just have this little sponge. I don't know, I found pieces of that somewhere. You can use any kind of a soft sponge or a soft cloth. I would not recommend a paper towel, because the paper on paper, you really don't want to have all those little paper pieces that might come off the paper towel. So I dip the sponge into water just to get it a little bit wet. And then I have two colors here. One is burnt umber and the other one is a Van Dyke brown. So I'm just gonna get a little bit on there. The burnt umber is very reddish. The Van Dyke brown is a little bit just darker brown. So I mix those together. And I like to use these paper palettes. So it's not just paper, it's a special paper for paint. And I don't want to have too much paint on the sponge, because I don't want the paper to get too dark. So that's why I always start in the middle of the canvas, because I'm going to paint over the canvas anyway. And then you want to start rubbing this over your paper, just like that. So it's important that your sponge is not too wet, because we don't want to lift the paper or get the paper too wet so it might come off again. After all, Modge Podge is, you can easily wash that off with water, so and we don't want to get our paper soaking wet again. So we just get some color onto the paper, and it gives it this aged look. That looks really starting to like that. And you can go darker if you want. And you will see sometimes these areas appear where I think the glue comes through. It's all very uneven, and I like that. That's really what I'm going for. And I think this is enough color for me. So I will just let this sit and dry for just a second, and then we're ready for the next step. And the next step will be to put a coat of red paint on our pieces. And I have one where I've already put the red paint onto the painting. So you pick your favorite color of red, take a brush and just adhere the first coat. Just go carefully around the edges, but you don't have to be too meticulous about it, because we're still going to paint several coats of this over the painting. And you can see here the paper, sometimes, you know, the browns have a little bit of a different tone, but that's basically what I will do now. I will paint all of this in with the first coat of red. And it takes a few coats, and I will show you then how I create the shadows and more of those outlines. So after I have painted on just one coat of red, I'm ready for the next step. Sometimes, depending on your canvas or the paint you use, you might need a second coat of just red, but I'm just ready to go over it with my next layer. I have some red paint, and I just use any kind of a red paint that comes out of the tube, like these, for example, Liquitex or any brand. And this is a little bit thicker paint, so let's just start here in one section. So I paint it out with red first. Okay, so my red paint is still wet, so I go in sections. Here's still my red paint, and I use just a regular flat brush. Then I go and I have a little angled brush here. I wet the brush, kind of squeeze this out a little, and then I have some black paint. And for this I use more liquefied black paint, It's a little bit thinner, but a paint out of the tube can work just as well. And I put a little bit of paint on here. I don't want to do too much. So now I go around my edge. And right now that looks like, wow, this is very black. And then I put my brush aside and I go back and add a little bit more red paint on here. And now I want to blend this in, and that's why you have to work a little bit fast so nothing dries. And now I can get a nice blended tone into from the dark into the red, and you can see how it creates this nice shadow around your edge, and it makes your paper really pop up. I'm going to raise this a little bit so you can see closely, but this looks really nice. And I go around the whole painting like this until it's all filled in. Once that's done, sometimes I take a really soft brush and add some black areas on top of here, and when I'm completely finished with the painting, I put some glazes on top of it. A varnish. I put usually 3 layers of varnish on the painting, and this is a finished piece that you can see here, where I have added gold leaf, added more black areas, all to create a new piece, Songs of Flying Dragons. I think this one will be number 35 if I'm not mistaken.